This episode is proudly supported by Pepe Sayer Australian Cultured Butter, batch churned from single origin cream.
We've got a culturing process, a fermenting process, an aging process. So the butter will taste very different than, I guess, the average supermarket butter. I like to say we make butter makers butter. Like, this is the sort of butter makers would like to eat, simply because of the slow process in which we ferment and age and get the flavour into it. You know, the natural fermentation that gets all the flavours into the cream, and then once you churn it, you end up with this really rich, flavoursome butter that evolves and changes because it's a live culture that's in the butter as well.
For more information, go to pepesayer.com.au.
It's really announcing that we're not an insular culture anymore. You don't have to go out to, say, out in the west of Caroline Springs or Sunshine to get your Filipino fix. We're coming to the people, and that's amazing.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Burnout has been a common theme for many of our guests, an all-or-nothing approach to their job which delivers high levels of joy and extreme exhaustion. As a result, we've seen many take a new approach to their careers in food. John Rivera is the co-owner of Kariton in Melbourne. John, how are you?
Good, thank you. Thanks for having me on, Huck.
It's great to get you on the show. You've had a pretty interesting career and a bit of a shift in sort of what you're doing in food. Tell us a little bit about Kariton.
Yeah, I have. It's been an interesting journey. Kariton, I guess it specializes in artisanal Asian-inspired gelato. We started off in 2020 during the height of the Melbourne lockdowns. Myself and one of my friends and business partners, Min, who I started the business with, we were fine dining chefs for a good part of 10 years. The crazy part about COVID, I guess, is that we always thought we'd have work anywhere in the world. You know, we could go to Europe, we'd go to Asia, Africa, you name it, all the corners, and we would never be short of a penny. And then COVID came along, especially here in Melbourne. It was very tough because we had the strictest lockdowns anywhere. We found ourselves sitting on our ass for 2 weeks. I was playing Sims on the couch, and it was a dream after 90-hour weeks for 10 or so years. All of a sudden I got this break. But we just realized that we needed to do something. We needed, I guess, somewhere to channel our creativity, and in a way also bring joy and happiness to the people of Melbourne during that dark time. So yeah, we started off delivering tubs of gelato all over Melbourne, and in January 2022 we opened our first store in Footscray in Melbourne, and last year in October we opened our flagship store in Russell Street in Melbourne Chinatown, and in, hopefully, depending when this podcast airs, but the end of June, we'll be opening our third store in Glen Waverley. So it's been a hell of a journey, something we're really, really proud of, and we're really happy with, I guess, also the representation that it has had for Filipinos and Asians in Melbourne.
Why did you head down that gelato path, and what were the challenges for you initially?
Yeah. I actually started off as a pastry chef. I went to TAFE studying patisserie. It was during I grew up during that time where Adriano Zumbo was the king, and I was greatly inspired by his croquembouche and macaron towers that I saw on MasterChef. So I gravitated towards doing pastry. That's where I met Min. Min and I were partners for all of our practical classes at William Anglers. My journey kind of took me towards the savory path, but then, we've always loved ice cream and gelato. It's funny because when my wife, or my fiance at the time, we were in Italy, we promised ourselves that we were going to have one scoop of gelato every day. We're going to have gelato every day that we're in Italy. And sometimes, you go on those tours and you miss out on your gelato. So there were days where we were doubling up and having 9 scoops of gelato a day. right about the same time that my metabolism started to slow down too, so it was perfect. But for us, ice cream, you have to kind of be a little bit crazy to not like ice cream. There's a sense of childlike joy that it brings to people. When whether it's cold or hot, people do love ice cream. That's, I guess, one of the motivators that we had at the start to do this sort of business, to be able to bring that childlike joy to people in their homes. During COVID as well, like when COVID started, we had just gotten back from the Philippines for my wedding, and Min, who's Vietnamese, I showed him the dirty ice cream culture in the Philippines, where these men would be pedaling around carts on the streets and ring the bell, and all the kids and adults as well would come around and get dirt cheap homemade ice cream. It's really ingrained in the Filipino culture. So when Min, who actually now works for a business that wholesales desserts and gelato to many big restaurants and groups in Melbourne, his boss has been a great mentor and friend of ours since our early days in William Angliss. He had a little factory to produce the stuff, and he said, look, you guys aren't doing anything, maybe you want to try something out, just kind of get you through whilst there's nothing happening. Luckily enough, we and smartly enough, we took that chance to be able to produce our products safely and consistently. And yeah, and that's kind of how we fell into it. To be honest with you, Huck, at the start, I only kind of thought of Kariton as a COVID hustle. My mind was still very much in fine dining cooking. I had dreams and plans of opening my own little place here in Melbourne, and the thought of kind of sidestepping to do something more casual wasn't really on my mind. And I guess having that time to reflect, having that time during lockdown to just kind of sit and reflect on my career and my life and my circumstances, I realized that I'm not taking a step back as what I thought I was going to do. In a way, I actually find myself now being a lot more happy and creative and free, because gelato is this great vessel where you're able to reach so many more people in a way that's approachable and familiar, and you're able to express yourself. Like right now, our bestseller is still our ube gelato, purple yam, and it's funny because we have non-Filipinos coming to the store, and in their cups or in their cones is this Barney purple gelato that no one would ever think about having.
I want to explore what you're doing there at Kariton in more detail in a little bit, but take us back to when you were young. Where did you grow up, and sort of what role did food play in your life growing up?
So growing up, I have a very typical, I guess, immigrant story. I was born in the Philippines, and then we moved to New Zealand when I was 3, back in '96. Back then, we were kind of one of the first waves of Filipinos or foreigners who really moved to New Zealand. It was a very, very interesting and great childhood. Like, it wasn't bad at all. New Zealand is an amazing, accepting culture, multicultural, just like Australia. And then in 2005, end of 2005, start of 2006, we moved here to Melbourne. And I spent all of my formative years here in Melbourne. I did or in Australia anyway, I did high school here in Melbourne, went to TAFE here in Melbourne, did my cooking in Melbourne and Sydney. And it's been an interesting journey, I guess, being a Filipino overseas. There is a lot of us, but growing up, I never really felt that representation because we're quite my parents' generation, they're quite insular in that they kept the culture to themselves and kind of asked their children to do their best to fit in. But in terms of my childhood, it was a very happy childhood. I was a chubby kid, and a lot of people will say I'm still a chubby adult. But yeah, love good food, right? But I've always loved food growing up. It always piqued my interest. I guess it's because I loved eating, but I also found interest in how to cook. I would come home every day and chuck on the Food Network, and I used to watch Gary Rhodes and like old like Neil Perry I used to watch as well. And it's funny because I think a lot of people get into food because their parents were great cooks or their family were great cooks. My mum and my dad, they were medical professionals in the Philippines. We were fortunate enough to have a big family where a lot of them would cook for us and take care of us, but also we were fortunate enough to be able to have helpers in the house who would cook meals for us as well. So when my mum actually moved to New Zealand, and my dad, it was a massive shell shock for them because all of a sudden they had to learn how to cook, to clean, to take care of the kids. They had to be this jack of all trades, and they literally didn't know how to cook back then. For the longest time, we were having a lot of fried food and boiled food. Thankfully enough, I say to my dad now, Dad, you've come leaps and bounds. Like some of my dad's cooking, I'm surprised. Like he cooks better than me sometimes. But I actually copped a lot of flack saying that on a report before, saying like I was inspired to become a chef because my mum was a terrible cook growing up, and we all laugh about it in the family. But it's a funny thing that I almost wanted to learn how to cook for myself. I used to come home from school and get whatever's in the pantry and make this like Frankenstein of a fried rice. And I just thought, watching Neil Perry of the wok and chucking things in and soy sauce and vinegar and blah, 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 having no idea in the world and coming up with some sort of monstrosity. That was kind of one of my first memories cooking as a child. But cooking kind of does run in our family somewhat. My dad's mum, my grandmother, did own her own restaurant in the wet markets in the Philippines, and that was I do remember every time we go home to the Philippines, I'd spend a lot of time there, or she'd bring a lot of food back home for me, and it was very, very formative in my core memories.
You mentioned that your parents were quite insular about their Filipino heritage. Did that make you want to explore that and dive into your heritage as you became an adult?
Yeah, it has actually. I think growing up, a lot of Filipinos my age or my generation, our parents did tell us, go to school, fit in, learn the language, and try not to stick out too much. I guess it was a little bit of a defense mechanism. You parallel that with other Southeast Asian cultures. You look at the Vietnamese, the Thai, the Malaysian, they all kind of really wore their culture. And you can see that in the little mini communities that they have in the suburbs. I don't know. To me, it's almost a Filipino trait of that generation, I guess, from their upbringing with the certain things that happened in the Philippines with colonization, World War II, the Marcos regime. That's another podcast in itself. But for me, growing up, when I was in high school, I tried to blend in with all the Italians and the Maltese that I was growing up with, trying to play soccer and trying to be like them. But then it reached a point in my youth when I was like, I'm Filipino. Why? Like I'm proud of that. I'm really, really proud of that. But I don't see anyone who looks like me, talks like me, eats like me, to be a role model here in Australia. And I guess that that lit a spark inside me to explore my culture, to gain that knowledge and explore my culture, and then B, to share it to the world. We would, my connection with my culture really when I was young was at home with my family at the dinner table, eating Filipino food, speaking the language. To this day, my mum refuses to speak to me in English. And I think to myself, why are we just kind of leaving all of this beautiful food and culture to the household? Like, even when my friends would come over or we'd go to a party where we know that non-Filipinos would be there, we'd try to cook for their palate, or we'd try to cook for their expectations, something that wouldn't offend them. Whereas at home, we'd be having like pork blood stew, or my dad would make this like stir fry of pork liver that was absolutely delicious. So that's the one thing that really motivated me from the start, and to this day it kind of still motivates me to my motivations now, I guess, have evolved. I still want to share the culture with non-Filipinos and show how beautiful our cuisine is, but also inspire the next generation of Filipinos, and hopefully be that role model that I didn't have when I was growing up.
Yeah, well, I think you definitely are. And I mean, you would know more than anyone the incredible diversity of Filipino cuisine, but sort of the proliferation of Filipino food that's happening at the moment, this amazing evolution within the Australian culinary landscape with different operators showcasing Filipino food. How do you feel about what's going on?
Oh, I'm so proud, Huck. Like, even just in Melbourne alone, there's so many more Filipinos on all levels of hospitality, opening up and showcasing the cuisine. We can, Sarai just won New Restaurant of the Year last year, and that's absolutely amazing. We've got some smaller, not smaller, but operators in the fast casual and more casual bracket with like Barcada, who do Filipino street food, and Inasal Express, they do this beautiful Filipino grilled chicken that is, that'll blow Nando's and your local charcoal chicken shop out of the water. Just here in the CBD alone, in the space of a year, including Kariton, we've had 4 or 5 Filipino businesses pop up in the Melbourne CBD, and that's massive for representation. It's massive for the reach, because now it's really I guess announcing that we're not an insular culture anymore. You don't have to go out to, say, out in the west of Caroline Springs or Sunshine to get your Filipino fix. We're coming to the people, and that's amazing. Sydney has its great places too. One really great place I can think of is Sydney Cebu Lechon in Newtown. They make amazing, southern Philippine style lechon. That's just one of the best things you can put in your mouth, really.
Let's go back a little bit. Where did you sort of get your foot in the door? What were the sort of venues that were really important for you and people as you started to build your career?
Well, I think since I've been able to work, I've always been in some sort of food or hospitality. At the stroke of 14 and 9 months, I started working at KFC. And man, fast food, people look down on fast food, but when you're a young kid and you learn all those basics in such a high pressure, high volume environment, it's so worth it. So when people ask sometimes, name some of your most influential places, I'm like, yeah, KFC's one. But no, when I was in, I guess I've been really lucky, Huck, in my career to work at some really great places and get my foot in the door in some really great places. When I was still in TAFE, I started working at Rockpool Bar and Grill in Melbourne. I started off as a polisher, just in the back polishing glasses, polishing cutlery. really, what you'd think is like what traditionally people would say, oh, that's the lowest job in the kitchen or in the business. But for me, it was a start. I was so proud to just get my foot in the door of a Neil Perry restaurant, because I've just been watching him throughout my teens cooking. And from there, I try my best everywhere I am to show my worth and show that I can do more than the job that I'm hired to do. I think that's a very important mindset, not just in hospitality, but in everything in life, I guess. So I moved from polishing plates and cutlery to running food to guests, to eventually, by the end of my stint as a waiter there at Rockpool, I was taking my own section at 18. And that was a very influential time for me. It allowed me to understand the service and the front of house side of it as well, the importance of wine and cocktails and timing. And then once I graduated from Anglis, I made that jump into the kitchen. I was sweet talking the pastry chef the whole time I was on the floor to eventually give me a job, and he eventually did. So I was working. I did pastry there for a year and a half, and being in that high volume, highly skilled environment. At the time, the chefs there were Sack Nicholson, Robbie Bell, who now owns City Larder and Patisserie, City Larder Charcuterie, and a whole host of other highly skilled chefs who motivated me to really do more. Robbie was the first person to actually say, look, if you want to be a pastry chef, great, that's cool, but mate, you're 18, 19, like, how are you so sure right now that that's what you want to be? He's like, you should dabble in the savory side. And I really took that to heart, and I said, okay, Rob, like, I'd love to do more. Can you? And he used to work with Phil Wood over in Sydney in the flagships. I said, Rob, you reckon you can get me a trial at the original in Sydney? And he was on the phone later that night, and he's like, all right, well, they're expecting for a trial like the next week. And I'm like, oh crap, okay. To put into perspective as well, I'm the youngest of my family, and I'm the youngest of like 32, like not 32 actually, like 22 cousins. So I'm the baby. So I told my mum I was going to go to Sydney for like just a trip. She didn't know I was going there for a trial. So I went to Rockpool, did the trial. About 2 weeks later, after nagging Robbie to call Phil again to ask if I've got the job, I got the job, and I was elated until I went home and I told my mum that, hey, I'm moving to Sydney, by the way, guys. They're like, when? Oh, they're expecting me there in about 2 weeks' time. So that was my first foray into fine dining. It was such a massive step up from Rockpool, not from Bar and Grill, sorry, not in, I guess, like, not that we were making terrible stuff at Rockpool, but that intensity and that concentration and that passion just intensified so much more in the flagship. It almost felt like, if Rockpool, you were just a soldier in the army, you go to the flagship, it's the Marines. Like, these guys are the best of the best. And I was a massive fish out of water, like 20-year-old going into this 3-hat establishment with a really driven and passionate young chef. It was just pedal to the metal every day. But I look back at those times and I learned so much. If not just skill, but in mentality of like, I can get through every day, any day, as long as I have the right mindset to take on any challenge I can.
There's an old saying that sort of says that you should never meet your heroes. What was it like sort of meeting Neil Perry and working for him, given sort of your experience watching him on the television?
Yeah, I met him. I was able to meet him a few times. Every single time I shoot myself. You look at these people as your idols and your heroes, and when they walk when they walk in and they walk by you, it's like they have this aura about them. They're just like, oh my god, that's Neil Perry. And then everyone around me is just like, yeah, it's Neil Perry. What are you on about? And I'm just there, just absolutely cheesing, like, no, you don't understand. It's Neil Perry. Neil was an absolutely great person. He's a great boss. Even though at that time Neil wasn't in the kitchen anymore every day, you can tell that he created a business culture that fostered people and really mentored them. And those times that I did actually, to be honest, I remember this one day where I overapproved all the bread, and I was like, I'm gonna get, and it was at the flagship, I'm gonna absolutely get caned for this. Like, it was flat, it was sad, it was saggy. And he came past, and he was real gentle about it. He's like, I think you've taken the bread a bit too far today. Tomorrow's going to be a better day. And I said, yeah, chef, it is going to be a better day. And that kind of sums up exactly how Neil was like. Shit happens. It does happen, even at the highest level. But tomorrow's a new day, and you learn from your mistakes.
Tell us about going back to Melbourne. What sort of lured you back down there, and where did you find your feet?
Really, what lured me back was homesickness. I'm very family orientated and very close to my family. So those 2 years in Sydney, being away from the closest people in my life, really it was a really hard thing for me. So I eventually moved back to Melbourne to be with my family again. But coming back to Melbourne, I took that mindset that I came from a 3-hat. I need to go back to a 3-hat, or else I've kind of like, what am I doing? So I signed up for some stages at Attica and Bray. I end up doing 4 weeks at Attica and then 2 weeks at Bray, and there were amazing experiences to see kind of that style of service that I've never seen before. If Rockpool, the flagship was a lot more traditional, I'd say old school style fine dining, whereas Attica and Bray were more of this modern European style fine dining with the set menu and the degustation. I met I loved my time there. I met some amazing people that I'm still really quite close with and friends with, but it didn't click for me. I didn't feel like what I needed was in those restaurants. I think everybody who walks into Attica and Bray with a stage, 9 times out of 10 they want a job, and I'd be lying if I say I didn't. I wasn't fishing for a job when I stepped into the door. But by the end of my time there, I just thought, look, this isn't for me, and I had to be honest with myself about that. But during that time was when Lume was opening under Sean Quaid, and it was the most mysterious restaurant at the time. At that time, they weren't allowing you to even take photos of their dishes. As far-fetched as that sounds now in the 21st century. So I just kind of shot an email out, and Sean asked me to come in for an interview, and he kind of talked to me about how he cooks and his philosophy. And what really drew me in was how creative and molecular Sean was. He was using a lot of these ingredients that I longed to learn more about, thanks to Heston and the Rocker Brothers and Ferran Adria, and this idea of making something look like something it isn't, like a cauliflower cheese, this sense of art form. So I snapped up that opportunity. Honestly, the hardest job of my life. Opening this restaurant, almost being part of this opening team of this restaurant, where they're booked out every day. We were doing 18 courses to start off with at that point, and it was just you on that section alone. There was no one else coming to help you, not like in Rockpool or Attica or Bray, where you had people to rely on in that section. It's like, nah, this is you. You get everything done by 4 o'clock, or you hope that you can swim very good during service. I still say to Sean every time we catch up, like, you're the one chef that really, really made me reconsider whether I wanted to be a chef or a real estate agent. Because there was one day where, I don't know, I wasn't making the cauliflower cheese right. And it was melting. It was literally melting in the dehydrator at like 40 degrees. And that was, at that point, the showstopper, the pinnacle. We were known for the cauliflower cheese. So I stayed back till like 3 a.m. to do the next batch the next day. And I said to myself, man, if it doesn't work tomorrow, I'm going to pack up my knives and I'm going to sign myself up to learn real estate, because, stuff this. Thankfully, I don't know if thankfully it did work out. And that was a really trying experience in Lume during that first year, because it was just hectic. But it really instilled, like, okay, I can do whatever now. And Sean really became a great mentor of mine, to not just in cooking and teaching me how to cook, but in philosophy of my own food and how to look at things and marketing and branding and all of that stuff. So I can't thank him enough for my time there.
You spent a bit of time at Amaru as well. Was that quite different to your experiences with Lume?
Yeah. Amaru was an amazing time. Amaru, if Lume was an artistic venture, Clinton and his cooking is definitely more instinctive, and I really enjoyed that. Cooking things over fire and cooking with direct heat. It was such an amazing time, and we were such a small team back then and close knit, and we really had each other's back. And Clinton was in the kitchen every day, and we really drew off his passion. I really wanted to go somewhere that was owner operated to understand what that life was like, because eventually I thought to myself, if I'm going to open my own restaurant, I want to see the different kind of aspects, whether I want to do it on my own, if I want to do it with partners or an angel investor or whatever. But that was just a great time, because he was also just kind of starting off as well, and we were able to grow with him and with the business, and he gave us a lot of freedom to help him to do that.
You eventually came back to Lume as executive chef. What sort of impact did that role have on you?
Yeah, that was a massive thing. I didn't expect it. Sean was moving on to other ventures, and he kind of tapped me on the shoulder. I got an email from him one day like, hey, I want you to be the exec chef and take over me. And look, long story short, it was a great time. I learned so much. Maybe I learned more about what I didn't want than what I did want. In hindsight, I was probably much too young and inexperienced, immature for that role. But it's one of those things where you can't really say no to, because you don't know when it's going to come ahead next, or when that offer's going to come next. There were certain I guess things that I was doing. I was fresh off coming back from San Pellegrino Young Chef. I felt like I was standing on clouds, and I was really, really passionate about doing modern Filipino food, but that passion was almost unchecked and unhinged, and I was really driven by my own ego to try to show off how much I can do, and I forgot that we're cooking for people. We want to cook food that people want. And I can look back now and say that with confidence that, like, man, I messed up a lot of things back then. Back then I wouldn't have admitted that, but it was a time where I learned a lot about myself, and it allowed me to kind of recenter what my priorities are with my food and my cooking, because it's so easy to get caught up in all of the accolades and the awards and the write-ups and this and that, where you forget that, wait, we're cooking for people. Like, at the end of the day, it's these people that, you want bums on seats. A successful restaurant is bums on seats, not how many write-ups they have or how many articles they have of the chef. And my motivators were probably wrong. I maybe fell into that mindset. But I learned a lot. I learned so much of what food to cook, what works, what doesn't work, how to manage and how not to manage people. So yeah, as much as it was, I think, in my personal opinion, a negative time for myself, I take positives out of it to implement into here at Kariton or in the next business that I have, is to, what are we going to do? What are we going to do in terms of food? We always have the customer in the focus. How to treat the staff, how to get the best out of them without burning them out, or without, essentially pissing them off enough to just leave you. It's super important.
You changed sort of tact in the food industry, but is there sort of times that you miss the energy of the commercial kitchen and that sort of world that you were immersed in for so long?
Oh yeah, I do. I really do. My wife would kill me for saying that I miss the kitchen, especially now that we have almost a 2-year-old son and another one on the way. Like me being away at night, I'd probably get a divorce served up to me. But because I guess that's all I knew for 10 years, and it's that energy and camaraderie when you're with somebody on the line on a busy day and you're making it happen. No one can understand that feeling unless you've been in there. You've been in the trenches with your mates, cooking some of the best food. To this day, like I say, I miss that. We're actually, this might be an exclusive, but we're actually looking to open a little Filipino restaurant and bar here in the Melbourne CBD. Where we're just in negotiations right now with a site that hopefully goes our way. But yeah, so I mean, I'm not going to be there. I was saying to the chef that we're eventually going to have run the place, I'm like, man, I'll probably do a service or so a day, like a week. But as soon as I start messing things up, I'm just gonna, see you later. But it's that energy. You miss that energy. You miss that kind of like banter and camaraderie. And you miss, for me, I guess, one thing with Kariton that I don't get to experience as much now, because I'm usually in the production kitchen upstairs or in the office, is the happiness and the enjoyment that your customers get when they eat your food or have your creation. That was kind of the one thing that I really loved at Rockpool Bar and Grill when I was a waiter, was clearing people's plates, and plates were empty. Like, people would damn near lick plates. That to me is why we do this, and that's kind of one thing that why I would go back into a restaurant, and why I would kind of be part of another restaurant project, is just to experience that again.
Well, you mentioned a little earlier about the purple yam gelato. Tell us a little bit about some of the products and the flavors that you guys are doing that people might not be familiar with.
Yeah, so our core flavors are Filipino inspired. It's just a nod to our origins in lockdown. So at all times we have 10 Filipino inspired flavors, and then 2 Asian inspired creative flavors that we kind of just, what's cool, what do we want to play around with. But gelato has been an amazing vehicle to convey Filipino flavors and ingredients. Purple yam to this day is still our best seller. We'll do over, I think, over like 200 kilos of that over the 2 stores per week. And through the ice cream, we've been able to do, like, I'm looking at it right now, we're doing toasted rice and chocolate with fish sauce caramel. It's inspired by a breakfast porridge we have in the Philippines of chocolate rice, and we eat it with dried salted fish. Filipinos love this sweet and savory combination. And it's a shock and awe thing. People are like, oh, fish sauce caramel. Oh, well, like that's a bit weird, let's try it. And then they try it and they realize, oh, it works. And it's one of our best sellers as well. But it's been a great way to it's a great platform to be able to use these ingredients and flavors that people haven't really had before, that would really kind of scare them off, or not put them off, but like they'd be hesitant to go for those things, because I guess most ice cream shops you go to, it's like there's going to be a vanilla, there's going to be a pistachio, there's going to be a chocolate if you don't want to be too adventurous.
Well, you're doing amazing things and look forward to seeing what's emerging down the track. But what do you love about what you do?
I guess it's 80 hours. Like I'm now a day walker, as they call it. But that means I get to be with my family, and I get to be with my wife and enjoy, some things like social sports that I took for granted when I was a chef. What I really, really enjoy about my job now is the freedom and to be creative, and knowing that, like, how do I put this? I feel like I'm more creative now than I was before as a chef, and kind of we look at ice cream as a blank canvas, or gelato as a blank canvas. Okay, like, here's the base. What base are we going to do? What are we going to add to that to highlight that ingredient or a texture or whatever? And we've been able to come up with some really, really cool flavors and ideas. Like, one of the things that I really love and I'm proud of, one of the flavors that we did is called One in a Melon, where we took inspiration from the dessert card in Yum Cha. You know how there's always like sliced jelly and melon, and okay, we want to put watermelon sorbet, honeydew sorbet, and cantaloupe sorbet all in one tin. So when you scoop it, it's kind of have this rippled effect to invoke that Yum Cha dessert. And what we found in the process was that all three melons, by their, I guess, biological makeup, that's what it's called in it. But anyway, like, because of how they react, instead of having this one amalgamous melon sorbet, when you eat it, you can still actually taste the three different melons separately, because they attack different parts of your palate. And like, kind of having that kind of freedom to explore that stuff and being able to explore different cultures, because we're not set in this box that we're doing. We're having so much fun now, and that really is the joy of what I'm doing now.
Well, John, it's an absolute honour to have you on Deep in the Weeds today, to hear just a part of your story, and it sounds like there's so much more to come. So hopefully we can catch up again soon and keep in touch.
Yeah, thank you, Huck. Thanks for letting me ramble on your podcast today.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we take a deep dive into the lives of the incredible people who ply their trade in the food and hospitality sector. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast, or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.